through a basic hissy fit. And it is true that Naboth refused to this deal with King Ahab, and this is Ahab's montage. Over and over again throughout the lessons, we've heard that King Ahab gets upset, he goes home, and he gets angry, and he sulks, and he throws a fit. And then his wife comes in, Jezebel, yes, and asks the king, why are you so upset and so depressed that you're not eating? And the king goes through this, well, I wanted that piece of property, and Naboth wouldn't sell it to me, so he wouldn't trade for it either. And Jezebel says, you just go worry about other things. I'll take care of Naboth. I'll take care of this. She actually says to King Ahab in Hebrew, it's like, why don't you start acting like a king? Which that's kind of profound. Why don't you start acting like a king? So Jezebel winds up scheming this plot against Naboth. Sounds like we're into the Camel Club by David Baldacci, right? Anybody read David Baldacci, the Camel Club? You all know this is where it's going, right? Or John Grisham and one of his young lawyers, gets into the scheme. This is what it sounds like, but this is the Bible. And it gets even better. Because what Jezebel does is what we know she's going to do. She sets up this plot. I'll write it in the king's hand. I'll even put his stamp of approval on it. I'll even put his seal on it. And I'll say, let's call fast and bring in 2 scoundrels to sit, and we'll honor Naboth for his wonderful work in that vineyard. And we'll sit him at the head of the table, and we'll bring in 2 of these other guys, and he'll make a charge against Naboth. He'll charge him with blasphemy, and he'll curse God and the king. And then we'll be able to throw him out into the streets, kill him. And see how Jezebel thinks? We know this because it happens in our own world, right? Here in 1 Kings, we see God's people entangled once again in the ways of the world that has lost its direction and purpose. We see God's people are once again invited to deal with the trespasses and other misappropriate behaviors of the Ahabs and Jezebels of our own culture. We are not just given the ability to speak out against the wrongs of the world. We are given the responsibility to hold this world accountable. We are challenged this week with the model of Elijah, who challenges the dishonesty and the political immorality of those who take advantage of others around us. Elijah has been instructed to go live in the world that is surrounded by those who have lost their purpose. And we too today live in a world that has lost their direction and its purpose of being kind and decent people. Elijah becomes a part of a society that has neglected its purpose for holy space. Elijah, last week we heard about him going to live in this land where he was fed by God's protection, and he would be fed on the fact that the widow's need would feed him of his spirituality and help him understand the powerlessness that widows and orphans of the world go through. And Elijah would, like us, this is the kind of world that we as Christian, as faithful, God-fearing people are invited to be a part of. Yes, it's a struggle and it's difficult to stand up to those King Ahabs in our world. But this is the kind of world we have inherited. That's why I think they used Naboth's vineyard was inherited. It was an ancestral inheritance because Israel is known as God's vineyard. Elijah challenges Ahab again and again throughout his relationship with the king. How long are you going to limp along? How long are you going to waver back and forth between a God who gives you vision for the future and the gods that you create around yourself for today? For do you not know that these gods that build up rust and collect the dust will dissolve? But the God of Israel will make you live forever abundantly in his grace. That's the choice that we have today. And that's the choice that we give to our nation and to all nations. We struggle with these things, these circumstances that seem to trespass upon a society that has lost direction and purpose. Not only is the vineyard been given as an inheritance, but rather the vineyard becomes a way that the biblical writers talk about the people of God. The vineyard is a very specific way that the biblical prophets and the poets and the psalmists talk about the people of God have been given God's abundance in this vineyard. God's grace is seen in the vineyard being planted, the people of God being planted in the world. That this vineyard is the fruit that multiplies and blesses others. God's vineyard blesses other people by God's gift. It is only Ahab who wants to turn it into a vegetable garden that will take toil and struggle and return the people to Egypt. The vegetable garden symbolizes the return of the people to be ripped up by Ahab. The vineyard will be ripped up and converted to the vegetable garden that they once had in Egypt, where they toiled and labored and slaved forever, for generation after generation. And Naboth knows this. That's why he's not giving up on this ancestral heritage. He doesn't want to give up on the people of God. He sort of is the forerunner to a Jesus that doesn't want to give up on the people of God. And he keeps the vineyard at the expense of his own life. Sound familiar? Israel, the vineyard of God, is not to become another Egypt where the powerful exploit the weak. Elijah's message crashes in upon the king's plans. He becomes the disrupting voice of God, challenging the corporate greed and the political irresponsibility that has allowed the imbalance to trespass against the people of the poor and the underprivileged of our society. And regardless of what you may think this November, not everybody who says they have a good deal for you is worried and concerned about everybody in this nation. Not everybody who says, hey, look, I've got a great deal for you, is not concerned about the people they're about to walk over. Not every transaction and not every policy decision made from the king's court is a good deal for everyone. Not everyone who says they are looking out for the poor and underprivileged are being honest with them around them. Remember the fox and the gingerbread man? The gingerbread man was running for his life, and the fox said, hey, I can get you across the river. Are we not hearing those promises right now across our media? I can get you across the river from both sides of the same coin. They're the same person. They're the same king that Elijah has fought against for years. And the fox says, I'll get you across the river. And what happens? The fox goes, no. Whoever you're leaning toward, remember that the church has a different agenda. I don't care to get involved in it too deeply. But I do care about the church's agenda to build up the brokenhearted, to bind up the wounds of the lost and the least and the last, to speak for those who can't speak for themselves, to give to the widow a life worth living, to bless the orphans and the strangers. In our modern society, many will come saying, "Hail, hail." But we need to remember that sometimes people use words to trespass against those who they take advantage of. Our prophetic voice today, yours and mine, because we're both prophetic voices. We're all prophetic voices in the proclamation of God's hope for the discouraged, and we give vision to those who feel excluded. Let us challenge the inequality of those who are so much a part of an underworld, an excluded kind of people. Let us be gatecrashers upon the world of the Ahabs and Jezebels who continue to make policies that don't always look out for the little guy. Let us be gatecrashers into their parties. And Elijah has given us the way to crash the party of the powerful inner circle of his king and remind us that our message is at times unwelcome. We are gatecrashers and disruptors to the parties of the rich, encouraging our own society to remember the lost, the last, and the least. Just as the woman today becomes an image for us all to take on, the woman is an uninvited guest to a party at Simon's house. Simon is a Pharisee, and she interrupts this dinner party at Simon's house just like Elijah has this interrupting nature to crash the party of the king. It is almost, this dinner party is almost reminiscent of Julia Roberts when she comes into the Beverly Palm Wilshire Hotel with Richard Gere, and she walks in and she goes, "Wow." And everybody standing in that lobby of that hotel starts to whisper under their breath, "Does Edward know exactly who he's with? Does he realize the kind of person that she is? Oh my, someone has to let Simon know who this gatecrasher is." These dinner parties, like Simon's dinner party, were probably hosted on porch-like enclosure that were open air. So people kind of hung out on the periphery, sitting in the window ledge and listening in to the dinner party. It would have not been difficult for gatecrashers just to listen in on the conversations around the table from the outer edge of the crowd. Do we not hear people on the outer edge and the margins of our conversations listening in to those decisions that we will make about them? People sit on the margins every day and listen to the conversations of policymakers from the fringes of their everyday lives, never even being noticed. Maybe it's time that we take on the nature of this woman and become gatecrashers into our church councils or our higher conferences and become interrupting gatecrashers in their parties. And maybe gatecrasher is not the best term for this woman. She's not violent. She just interrupts the party and the decisions that are being made around this inner circle. She just doesn't have an invitation to the gathering of the inner elites gathered at Simon's house. Nonetheless, she acts inappropriately toward Jesus once she's inside. Don't you know what kind of person she is? And Jesus responds. I mean, it's even Jesus that throws a wrench into our reading. He doesn't respond like, no, get away from me. He responds differently than we all suspect anyway. She has been a distraction to those of us who just want to have our scheduled devotion time with Jesus. And I think the church needs gate crashers to interrupt our scheduled time of devotion. We find the very nature of these types of gate crashers to be an annoyance to our dinner parties and dinner conversations. But then again, maybe we need distractions and unwanted guests in our churches. The very nature and identity of the people of God is to be a gate crasher and to be those who inform the misinformed about their agendas. That it's not the one with the most toys at the end of life wins the game. What we really see in this woman is the actions of Jesus in our own lives, is it not? Let's just suspect for a minute, I want to suggest that this woman is taking up the actions of Jesus in our lives as she runs into my life and interrupted my goals for my life. And I used to tell Stanley Hauerwas, when I was going through a rough time several years ago, I told him, thank you for messing up my life. As a professor to do. I said, thank you for interrupting me and messing up my life. He says, yeah, good. Why should you be any different? Because Jesus takes up the role of this woman, this gate crasher, who challenges the trespasses of my life and the trespasses of others in our world and invites us to a new kingdom and a new party. In a world that has lost its direction, in a world that has lost its purpose, we need to remember that our relationship with God is formed in the wilderness. When we didn't know which way to go, we didn't know whether to go right or left, and I was so down in my life, that's where God picked me up. That's where I suspect that God picked you up. When we were once lost and least among the world, wandering without a purpose and meaning, God gave us a vision. Israel was considered the nobodies, the Naboths of society. Israel was considered a nobody until God called them together. The very word Hebrew, Abiru, it means a wandering outcast, somebody without direction. And that's the very people that God called together and formed and shaped them into God's blessing. Everywhere they went throughout the Old Testament, in the beginning of their life, they were strangers in a strange land. Elijah takes up the identity of a people who were only passing through this world, offering hope to another kind of kingdom that is drawing near in the ways of God. God invites us to live in a world in the way that will transform the lives of those around us with God's goodness. Whether we take on the role of Elijah or the woman that comes in to Jesus, or even Jesus himself, which we should. Whatever goes on out there, we know we have a job to do. We have an agenda that is so different from what we hear 6 days a week. And I'm afraid it's only going to get uglier until November. But if you can hang on to Matthew 6, the whole entire 3 chapters from there, that Sermon on the Mount gives us our marching orders and gives us our vision and our agenda for what we're supposed to do and be in the world. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who speak about justice and mercy. This world needs kind and decent people in leadership. And it needs the church to tell these other people that we are about a different way for people to live. I wonder what it will take for all the churches to get the message of God this way. The very first thing that God said to Abraham when he was transformed was, you are going to be a blessing to the nations. What that meant was, you and your family are going to bless others with the goodness of God through taking care of what? 3 things. 3 people who are going to be taken care of. The widows, the orphans, and the strangers. And if you looked out for them, you would not only receive blessing, but you would receive life and life abundantly. And that would be returned to those around you.